welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. So, quickly, our sponsors. We are proudly sponsored by Yugoku caps. You've seen me wearing them on the podcast. You can get the discount codes from me. Send me a message. I'll send them to you. They're floating around. We're also sponsored by Phoenix head torches. Same thing goes. If you're after a discount code, just get in touch. There are there on the web, but if you want them personally from me, I will send them to you. And also, finally, we are proudly sponsored by Home Trails. So Home Trails is my YouTube series interviewing famous trail runners from hopefully around the world at some point. In the UK at the moment, where we interview them on the trail in the home trails. You understand what it is, don't you? You've listened to the show. That's hopefully turning into a bit of a brand, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, on with the actual show. Okay, yes, we are recording. So welcome to returning guest, Gavin Dale.
Yeah, it's been, what is it, about a year and a half or so?
Yeah, so I had a look. It was April. Yeah, it was April last year,
Yeah,
April 2023.
Lakes
Yeah, so
Traverse.
it's been yeah, that was it. Yeah, Lakes Traverse 100K with your win there. So
Mm.
you've been busy since then, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been just, there's always something to do. So
Yeah.
too many
Yeah.
races and not enough time. So yeah, just trying to do as much as possible, really.
Yeah, as much as possible without completely
Yeah.
destroying yourself.
Well, yeah, within reason.
Awesome. So just I was just having a look to see what you've been up to, and among other things, like the start of this year, you had a second place at Arc of Attrition, so good solid
I did,
start to the year.
yeah, a theme of
Then
second to Mark Derbyshire, which is a good
well,
pattern.
yeah, but I suppose if you're going to come second to somebody, then it is you can you're
Yeah.
quite happy to come second
Oh,
to
yeah.
the elusive Mark Derbyshire. He's still dodging my requests for a
Oh, I
podcast.
know. He's very busy and important these days, so
Well, I've been trying to get him on for ages, and he's like, "Oh, wait until I do something worthwhile coming on to talk about." I'm like, "Well, what you view as
Yeah.
worthwhile is probably different to what
Mm.
everybody else views as worthwhile talking." So I'll get him on. I've told him that I'm going to have to talk to him after he does the spine race. So, well, he's not
Oh,
doing
definitely.
he's not doing the full.
He's
He's doing
moved down. Yeah, he's gone down
yeah,
to Challenger, I think it is, isn't he? He's
doing
doing.
challenge yourself. So, fair enough. He hasn't been well, has he? So.
Yeah.
So made a wise decision. But we're not here to talk about Mark Derbyshire. We're here to talk about you. So your most recent win was the Morn Sky Ultra. So you
Yes.
popped over to Ireland for that then. So what's that like? Because I haven't ran in the Morn Mountains. Are they the ones that are closest to Dublin? They are, aren't they?
Yeah. It's sort of. Oh, we flew into Belfast, and then it's south of Belfast.
Ah, I've
Um,
got it the wrong way
and
around.
yeah. So yeah, it's a little town, Newcastle, that we were based in, and then yeah, just amazing. It was my first time. I kind of, there's a few fell races and stuff over there, so I'd heard of it,
Mm.
but never been. And then it just had a great sort of course profile. It was, the ultra was 50K with, I think it was about 3,800 meters or something of climb. So as soon as I see something like that, that's my sort of course. The punchier, the better, basically. So yeah, a few of us went over together, including Mark, actually. Well, he pulled a sickie on the day, which, I'm not, I think he just, didn't want to race me over shorter distance.
Fair enough. Hopefully he's listening to this because the more encouragement he gets to come on the podcast, the better.
I'll make sure he sees it.
Did you find that? So who was I talking to? Who's Emma Stewart? I was talking to Emma Stewart because obviously she's from that way, isn't she? And I was
Mm,
talking about the fact that when I went over there I go over regularly for work and not regularly, probably like once or twice a year I'll go over for work. And I couldn't get over the fact that there's not as many like footpaths over there, so you get so used to like over here, sort of a footpath sort of, right outside my house. There's a public footpath and a bridleway and everything, and you can just get on it. Whereas
Mm,
over there, it seems like there's less sort of places to kind of, you can't just, if you're in the lakes, there's obviously like footpaths everywhere. If you're in the Peak District,
yeah, yeah.
there's rights of way everywhere, but it's not quite the same over there, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess where we were quite lucky in that we did back straight out onto the mountain, so it was a fair bit. But yeah, I think there is a bit of that, and yeah, I sort of
Mm.
noticed it a few bits as we were going
Seem
through.
like you have to sort of drive to somewhere to get like to go and drive to a
Mm,
mountain so you can go and sort of run around the trails and but I suppose it's a bit like how it is in the US where there's like designated places to go running.
designated
But
spots, yeah. I'm a
what
bit
was
too
the
spoiled with it now, like living in the lakes. Just
yeah,
you never ever to even look for a footpath. You're usually just on one.
yeah. That's true. What was the competition like over there? Then were you running against people that you knew really well, or was it new faces?
It was a bit of a mix, really. So obviously, yeah, I'd kind of expected to have a pretty good battle with Mark, but he actually pulled out about 5K into the race because he picked up a bit of an illness that morning. Basically, he'd woken up feeling pretty rough.
Mm.
Um, so then he sort of dropped out, and then I had it was Rye Webb who was there, who I've raced before, so I knew he'd be kind of up in the mix. And then another Irish guy, Killian Fleming, I think his name is, who was really good, and one of those ones that you sort of there's always someone at the start line who you don't know, and you sort of see and you think, oh, they're looking pretty nifty in their warm up. Um, I didn't see much of him sort of in the first half of it, but then a good sort of about 20 miles in, I'd sort of built up what I thought was a reasonable lead, and then he just kind of cruised up next to me to one of the aid stations, looking really, really calm, really collected. Um, and for me, that was a bit of a like, oh, because normally at that point, if somebody comes past you, at that point, it's usually I really struggle to come back from that and to then kind of find the extra gear. Um, but on that occasion, yeah, we sort of ran together for a while, and I was like, well, he's not actually gaining anything on me. So then, and we still had quite a few big climbs to go at that point. We had a lot of sort of would just be up and over all these big climbs. And we were both moving well, but I maybe just had a little bit more on the climbs. So then I was able in this last sort of 5-6 miles just to slowly put a little bit more into him again, and then yeah, just tried to held on for the descent. I think he took a wrong turn and got himself a bit lost right before the end, which is unfortunate for him. But yeah, it was fun, and that made it a good. It's always a fun battle. It's stressful in the moment, and at the moment you're kind of like just let's go away. You're still behind me. But yeah, I think it brings out the best in you for racing, so it's great fun.
Yeah, yeah, I'd imagine so. Yeah. Your sort of travel sort of where have you got any sort of limits on where you will travel for a race sort of thing? Are you happy to sort of go where and wherever sort of thing for racing? Because obviously it's not particularly easy to just nip over to Ireland, is it, to race? Have you got to have a real
Mm,
a strong reason to go somewhere for a race abroad?
I think
Not
yeah.
Ireland abroad.
I suppose I try and pick the ones abroad a bit more carefully, just because there's so much so close to me. Being in the lakes, like I am spoiled. I could fill an entire calendar
Mm.
for 3 or 4 years just of local races. Because there's so much around here that's so fun. Um, so I guess yeah, when I do the international ones, I mean, I love racing somewhere new. Like I do really like going abroad for that, and you make it a bit of a holiday. Um, that one, for example, there were a few of us who were going out together, so you sort of combine it as it's a holiday. We went out for a hike the next day to kind of have a look around as well. But yeah, and there was an appeal with that one. It's part of the new kind of UK skyrunning series, so it was nice just to have a look at that and maybe look at doing more of that in the future. But I like a balance, sort of a couple of international races each year. Um, but yeah, like I say, there's so much good stuff around me. I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, you're fortunate on you where you live. Is that sort of, would you sort of say that that's your sort of specialty now then? Is this something that you've sort of grown to realize that this is where your main strengths are, like with the really like the relatively shorter, there's still an ultra obviously, but the punchier stuff, is that, the sky running type race? Is
I
that
don't
where?
know. I mean, to be honest, like I don't even think 50k for me now feel in terms of like competitive racing. 50k feels at sort of the shorter end now. I enjoy variety, you know, and I think it's something we talked about when I last spoke with you. But I've kind of consciously tried to keep my racing really varied. So I still do a whole heap of fell races each year, and you know, some of those will take 20, 30 minutes.
Mm,
But my God, like it's an intense, painful, stressful 20, 30 minutes. And then at the top end, you know, again, I really enjoy the sort of the 100k to 100 mile um, things that are around 15 to 20 hours in terms of times. I really love that kind of racing. And I feel like particularly in the later half of this year, sort of I came away from Arc this year not thrilled with how I done. Like I came second, I had a good result, but there were a lot of things I needed to work on from it. Um, and I feel in the second half of this year, sort of the result I had at Lakeland 100, and then with this Bob Graham, I feel a lot more confident now in how to handle that kind of distance. But for me, it's then just about balance because I don't want to just do those races because of the kind of the build time into them and the recovery time. It takes a big chunk out of your season, and there's so much other stuff I like to do that you know I just enjoy a bit of everything really.
yeah, I suppose there's that danger in there that if you have success at a longer distance, thinking, oh, well, obviously the idea is to work up to a longer race and get better at them. And if you have some success at those longer ones, then there's the sort of danger of sort of typecasting yourself as like 100 mile runner, isn't there, sort of thing. So
Yeah, and
you conscious
I
of
kind
that?
of see it as at the moment like I'm very lucky in that I've got time on my side. You know, I turned 30 this year. To get, you know, again, not to talk about him all the time, but Mark, you know, you look at him, he's in his mid 40s and he's
Mm.
having some of the best results out there in terms of British 100 milers.
Mm.
I don't feel, you know, I'm keen at the moment to kind of not not pigeonhole myself into the longer distance stuff. And actually, while I can still do some of the shorter stuff, the punchiest things, um, I really, you know, I'm not a fan of flat racing. If I'm honest, it's got to have some hills in it, and the more hills, the better. Um, but yeah, I like picking, you know, a couple of longer distance ones each year. And in time, I will increase those, or I'll increase the distance. But for now, I'm content to kind of just get the full mix.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. But the risk of talking about Mark Derbyshire again, he's in his he's doing well in his mid 40s, and
Yeah,
it gives me a bit of hope because literally this month I'm 45, so I'm thinking, there's still
it's
time.
just great to see. Like I think you know, it does. It shows that you know, and you can see it in other British athletes like Thomas Roach, for example. You know, again, able to be really competitive at some of the top races and Golden Trail Series races
Mm,
and things. You know, in his 40s, it's yeah, it's not just about age, and there's so much scope. You know, still at that
mm,
age to have some incredible results.
mm. Yeah, tell me about what happened with Golden Trail then, because you sort of dabbled in that, didn't you? Well, how did that sort of
I
go?
did, yeah, I did. So I did the last year. I did the UK National Series, which I won, and that was fun. I enjoyed that for something quite different, I suppose. Of some of those races, sort of some of the mid-season races of it were much sort of faster and not as technical. Things like the Trail Marathon Wales, you know,
Mm,
is just really fast pace. Um, but then you get to do Ring of Steel as the final, which was a brilliant race, and I loved that. You know, and mate, that's just my sort of course all over. Um, and then yeah, so I won it, and then went out to do the European kind of final as well. Um, it was a bit of a, I mean, it would have been a tough week, I think, regardless, because of just the level. Obviously, then you move into a completely different field of athlete. Um, I got a bit unlucky in that I sort of I came into it in a place where I'd over raced myself anyway, so I was struggling with my Achilles. I was not in the best place, and then the first day I was out there, I went for a recce and fell and smashed my knee and my quad. So I had a bruise all down my quad, and quite a stiff knee. So I then spent the rest of the week basically just sort of frantically lying down trying to heal. Um, and so that was sort of on my mind, and it was all right to race on, but it wasn't brilliant. And so it was a bit of a culmination. And I definitely did it to myself as well, though, in that I did over train and over race before it. And just by that, I think October's a really hard time. Like there's a lot going on sort of through September and early October around here. So I just tried to do a bit of everything. And by the time I got to the Golden Trail, I'm just not in the best place for this. They're probably, again, those races probably are a bit too short for me now in terms of the speed. When you look at the speed that those runners are getting at on anything runnable, um, that is a bit too in kind of high level speed for me. But I mean,
Mm.
just to see some of those runners was incredible, and you see Remy and people like that. It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, but it is. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the sort of setup with those races? Because I interviewed Greg Valet and sort of spoke
Mm.
to him. There'd been a bit of criticism of the series that it was too sort of it was being made too much for the spectator sort of thing, and it was sort of taken.
Oh, with the sort of the flower
Yeah.
design, isn't it,
Yeah.
that they've gone for?
How did you feel
It's
about it?
I can see why they've done it, and I suppose Golden Trail, they've done a huge amount of work to make the sport, much more accessible, and they've got much more, all the kind of the live feed they do and everything now. So I think I understand their reasons for doing it, and they've worked very hard. It possibly, for me, I think part of the fun of longer trail races is that point of just kind of getting out in the trails and being alone, and that sort of that time away from it all. So for me, it's not a format I'm personally a fan of, but I think they're doing. It's not like they try and hide what they're doing. If you go for a Golden Trail series, that is part of it, and they're quite clear about they're just a slightly kind of glossier, slightly more commercial version of trail running.
Mm. Yeah, it's horses for courses, isn't it? And they're filling a gap. There's a gap in the market for it, and then people want to see racing. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're doing a good job of doing that, aren't they? Ultimately, yeah. Um, just why you sort of talking about going for a run, and being lonely and stuff. I was going to say use that as a segue into the Bob Graham, but I don't suppose at any point you were on your own, were you during the during that attempt?
No, well, no, I wasn't really, but I think that's the beauty of a Bob Graham, really. And I said it sort of um, to a few other people as well, but like it's about community to me. Like that's so I just remember when I first learned about Bob Graham, and it was on a podcast. I first heard about it, and I remember kind of thinking, oh, "What's that?" And you look it up, and I remember kind of being quite curious about all these rules around it. Of you can't just go and do it by yourself. You've got to have somebody kind of with you all the time, and it's partly to make sure you don't skip any summits. It's partly for safety, but I do think it's more than that. I think those are kind of the reasons or the rules for why you're meant to do it, but actually what it fosters because of that is this huge sense of community. So there are so many people on Facebook groups and on chat forums and all sorts who will go out, and if they're looking, it's sort of a rite of passage. If you want to do a Bob Graham, you go out first and you support other people's. So if you don't know the navigation, then you're just a mule. You're carrying someone's gear and you go out, and then you get a bit more familiar, and then maybe you do some navigation for people. But I mean, some of the first people I met in the lakes were through Bob Graham. People who either I paced for or who then came and paced my first Bob Graham, and some of those came back for for the one I've just done as well. And it just, yeah, I think it's such a unique bond that you get through that. And for somebody to kind of sacrifice 5 or 6 hours, often running in the night or running in the rain or all sorts of weather, and people just do it because they want to be a part of what you're doing, and they love it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of respect, isn't there, and a lot of like respect for the tradition of it. Um, and yeah, like you say, it's a rite of passage, isn't it? That if you if you have expectations to do it, you can't just turn up and do it unless you're Killian. You can't just turn up and
Yeah, I think no one was asking him to do any sort of support before. But I mean, for me, that one of the best examples is Jack Kensel, and
yes, yeah,
he
yeah.
because he really worked. He spent months here living in a van. He went and met the Blands. He recce the hell out of it. He knew every inch of that, and then and I was lucky enough I got to kind of run legs 4 and 5 with him. So I was on the paces on leg 4, and then I stuck on for leg 5 to see him to the end. Um, and so I was in this big group chat, on WhatsApp that's full of all these some of the best runners there are. Um, and I'd actually already, just by chance, my Bob Graham was scheduled for the week after his. Um, so I just put a message in that chat saying, I'm still looking for a couple of paces on mine. If anyone's free, give me a shout. And then Jack Kensel just sent me a message like, "Oh, I'll be there." And I was a bit like, well, "I think you're all right, mate. Like, probably just rest up. I think you've done enough." But he was insistent. He was like, "No, I'm there. I'll do leg 2." And he came along. He ran leg 2 with me, and he loved it. Like he was there with a big pack of Oreos. We
Mm.
got to the top of Fairfield, and there's this group of hikers sat there, and he just sort of goes like, "Oh, we got ourselves a Bob Graham here." And these guys just kind of look up like, what the hell is this? What is this?
Did he have his shirt off at the time as well?
I think he had a top on this time at least, but to me that's just the absolute essence of it. He didn't just because what he did was stunning and it was incredible, and I think it will take something really special for that record to be beaten. But he didn't just it wasn't just about the time to him. He put in the work and he embraced because it is something quite special and there is a bit of kind of local pride to it, I think, and that people don't want someone to just come and set a blazing time and then disappear again. They want you to respect the history and the tradition of it.
Yeah, you've got to earn it, haven't you? Yeah.
Mm.
Awesome. So for this time then, it was what did you do it in 14 hours, 57 minutes and 45 seconds. So
Yeah.
11th fastest overall. So that's, including every time of year, isn't it? What sort of time had you planned for? Have you sort of estimated to go for a 15 hours and below 15?
Yeah. So basically, when I first sort of thought about doing a winter bob, and I looked at what the fastest times were, and you've got sort of
What
two.
were the incidentally?
Well, you've
Sorry.
got there's sort of two times to look at really because you've got the fastest sort of rounded my style, which was supported, is Kim Collinson's, which was 15 hours 47. Then you've got Finley Wild, who just went out on his own and, and again created his own challenge basically. So he ran fully in the dark, unsupported, solo, and, navigating map and compass. He basically tried to make, and he did it in proper midwinter as well. So he wanted the hardest winter conditions he could get. And his time was 15 hours 35, which again to me is just it's an incomparable achievement. It's a stunning achievement. And one that I think only someone like Finley. There's barely anyone else that I think is capable of that. Um, so for me, then when I was looking, it was a tricky one because I kind of felt it would have felt a bit hollow. If I'm perfectly honest, it would have felt a bit hollow if I just knocked, say, 5 minutes off Finley's time. I'm like, well, that's they're two different records. It's supported and unsupported. And because what he achieved is just so special, I didn't want to just directly compare to his record. So initially I started at kind of just trying to take a bit of time off his, and then as we got closer to the time, I was like, well, actually, let's put in a 15-hour schedule, and that was something that then it made it feel more exciting, and like we were going for something just completely different. So yeah, it was sort of 3 weeks out. Was when I shifted it completely and we went to a 15-hour schedule, and then that was what we worked to from there really.
So with your sort of knowledge of the route and everything and your attempts before, did that seem like a vastly, you know, like out there sort of time to go for, or did you just were you fully sort of aware of your own abilities and that was within your reach?
I think it's one of those ones where it's possible, and it's like I knew it would take a good day for it, and that I'd need sort of everything, most things to align on the day. But also I'd kind of worked on that, I'd been out and run a few of the legs at the target pace. I'd worked, I'd kind of looked at splits for each leg and worked out where I could make that time up. So I wouldn't, I didn't go in 100% confident and sure that I could do it, but I went in knowing it was achievable if I worked for it.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but at any point were you sort of thinking, were there times where you're thinking I'm on pace for this, or were you thinking at any point it's slipping away, or you were
Oh
struggling?
yeah, like it was, and again, I think that made it a really great day because, or a night and day, because we had both. And I'd basically spent quite a long time, and the whole week before was agonizing over finding the right weather window, um, because it just kept changing. And we set a schedule at first for the Sunday, and then we had really strong winds, and it was a no go. Low cloud, rain, um, and then we moved so many times, and I was driving everybody mad. I was driving myself mad. Um, so we kind of went with this. In the end, it ended up being that the night, sort of Monday night through into Tuesday morning, was the best clear weather window, with kind of rain coming in by about midday Tuesday. So it was a compromise of sort of more running through the night than I'd wanted or than I'd intended. And it puts all of leg three, which is sort of one of the most technical and long legs. It meant that would, instead of being in daylight like I planned for it to be, it would all be at night.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, in terms of being ahead or behind schedule, like we kind of came through leg one. I think we got about 5 minutes up on schedule, which isn't leg one. You'll nearly always go up on schedule, because you're fresh, you're excited, you just get going. And then leg two, we ended up with we ended up with snow for pretty much the whole leg, which wasn't forecast, which is a bit of a low moment, and suddenly it came in partway through leg one actually, and you suddenly got this snow in. I was like, I have checked every forecast
There was no.
religiously. I've had long emails from mountain weather and stuff, sort of telling me how perfect the night's going to be. And then, and leg two is a funny one because with good visibility and a clear day, you can really motor along on leg two. And I know it pretty well. But we then we didn't go slow, but we had to slow off a little bit just because of the visibility. And there are some of those summits can be a bit harder to pick off when you can't see as well. Um, and then yeah, so we were sort of, I think we're pretty much bang on schedule by the end of leg two. But leg three, we had a good start, a really strong start, and the snow kind of eased off and visibility cleared up. But then once we hit, there's a lot of kind of technical rocky sections. Once you clear a Bow Fell, basically, and heading towards Scarfell Pike, there's a lot of kind of technical rock. And in the summer, if it's dry, you can kind of skip through it reasonably well, and you can just be jumping around. When we hit it, it had sort of a bit of snow, a bit of ice, a bit of frost on it, and it was pretty lethal and pretty treacherous. So we just had to back off on the pace, and that's the point where you're like, oh, you could just kind of feel the minutes. We weren't losing big chunks of time, but it would just be a minute there, a couple of minutes here, um, and it meant by the time we got down to Wasdale, we were about 9 minutes behind the schedule. And bear in mind, it's a 15-hour schedule, so it's, you know, when the idea was to go under 15, so you're like, oh, I'm 9 minutes behind already, and you have that kind of doubt of, well, 9 minutes isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, but if that nine becomes 12 and becomes 15, then it can very very quickly here go out of reach. So we kind of pushed a bit more in leg four, and at that point you get the advantage. The sun comes up, you get some daylight. There's some really fast runnable sections on leg four. So we made a bit of time and we came out 5 minutes down by the end of leg four, and it was fun because it was that thing of it meant it was never out of reach, but it was never guaranteed either. There wasn't a point of like, we've done all the hard work, we can just kind of cruise leg five and we've got it in the bag. It was okay, well, 5 minutes, we can make 5 minutes, but we're gonna have, we can't afford to mess about. So again, I had a great team on every leg, to be honest. I had a fantastic team, and on leg five, they just knew what we needed to do, and we moved well through all the fells. We just kept, I think we kept pretty much to the splits, made up like a minute or so between the three fells, and then we hit the road. And I kind of deliberately left myself a little bit of leeway in what I'd allowed for the road time, because it was where from my first bob I found that I could move well in the hills, but then come down onto the road and actually still move really well on that, and transitioning into kind of road running at the end. I made a lot of time, and I was able to do the same this time. So we made vast majority of that time. We got back on just the kind of final 4 or 5 miles running into Keswick.
Mm. Did did you have any worries over like kit and stuff like that? So if you've sort of planned for a clear night and no adverse kind of weather conditions, and then you have stuff like a flurry of snow come in and cover everything, are you sort of panicking about making sure that your crew has got stuff there? Would you have changed shoes, something like that, to allow for different?
I mean, you kind of plan for it's Cumbria, so even when they say it's not going to rain, it rains. Even today, there was no rain forecast today, and it still rained. So yeah, I had sort of a bum bag of spare kit that was being carried around by one of the pacers for me each time. So it had waterproofs top and bottom. It had extra gloves, an extra base layer and stuff, so that I knew I was covered then for every eventuality. And same with the paces. I kind of just said, in beforehand when you're all discussing it, you just say to everybody, just bring spare layers. Make sure you kitted out, and especially like the guys on leg three, they brought one of them, Tom Simpson. He'd actually brought quite a big backpack of stuff with him, and sort of a little group shelter and things, because it's particularly in that sort of area. If you do run into trouble, you could potentially be out there quite a long time. So there's a definite what we're doing, obviously, in that sort of scenario. It is a lot of running, and yes, like I was in shorts, for it and stuff. But you try and make sure that you've got the kit that if anything went wrong, actually you could come if you came to a stop and you had to stop moving and be out there for a few hours waiting for mountain rescue, that you wouldn't be in. You'd get cold, but that you'd be all right.
Yeah, yeah. Safety first, yeah, all
Mm.
times. So potentially then, if you'd not sort of had that bit of snow coming in, then do you think that would in the end would it have been quicker? Would you have sort of gone even more under 15, or do you think that you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because it's hard, isn't it? Of you're moving a bit slower, but then potentially you're saving your legs for a bit later on. And I think I view it now as like what I got was a proper winter round, and it was something we all kind of said it to each other, particularly through the night. You're like, well, no one can argue that this
Yeah,
is
that's true.
winter
Yeah,
round, and I think for me it was actually almost a positive, rather than just having this perfect day where 15 hours you run majority of it in the daylight and conditions are absolutely spot on. Like we got some, don't get me wrong, we got some really good conditions, and like 4 and 5 we had some almost perfect ground for it. um but we got the full mix. We got some winter conditions, and that's kind of it's a winter round. That's what it's about. So
yeah. I suppose that was the icing on the cake, wasn't it? Knowing that
yeah.
no one could sort of pull you up on it and say, oh well, you did have really good weather for it, so you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got pictures to prove the snow was there. So
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I'm looking at the picture now, the one you posted, all the snow everywhere. Yeah, it
mm.
was legit. Amazing. So your crew then, is this all sort of people? Was there anyone there that you sort of didn't know that had sort of turned up to volunteer, or was it all people that you know because you live in the lakes and everything?
I mean, yeah, obviously because I'm here in the lakes, like it was a lot of people I knew. So a lot from a good showing from the Ambleside AC Club, who I run for, and then yeah, sort of a good fair few just local fell runners, and various people I knew. So I had Kim Collinson, who used to have the record, his fellow kind of La Sportiva teammate.
Mm.
So he was leg 4 and 5 with me, which was great. Really nice to have him along. Josh Wade, who I hadn't properly run with before, and I'd sort of originally he'd not been available when I was due to be doing it, and then when the schedule changed, it was sort of I was gaining some people and losing others, so I sort of sent him a message and was like, I might need someone extra. Are you around? And he was hilarious. I've not, yeah, like I say, I've not probably run with him before, but
It's funny,
for
it's really
someone
good.
at his level and of his talent, just the funniest, and
Yeah.
most chill guy you can imagine, and he's sort of it was about halfway through leg two, and this is at like sort of middle absolute 1, 2 in the morning or something. We've got snow coming at us from every direction. It's pretty cold, you can't see a lot. And he just suddenly sort of shouted out, he was like, "This is bloody awesome. This is amazing. How cool is this?" Yeah. And he was just so happy, and yeah.
It's infectious, isn't it? His sense of humor is yeah, he's good. He's a good guy. I really like really
Yeah.
good guy. So sort of what are you thinking now then? It's like, so you've done, you've got this record, you can feel, because as far as like, fell running and trail running goes, like in the Lake District, you can almost like you could almost sort of retire your shoes now, couldn't you? Knowing that you've got that record or that it's going to last for a bit. What are your thoughts on what do you do now? Is it a case of like, because you've achieved that, is it, are you then starting to think, well, maybe I could go for Jack's summer record? Is that sort of the sort of thing?
Um, it doesn't. Nah, at the moment, I don't feel any kind of draw to that at the moment. I think for me, I really love the Bob Graham, and it's really special. I've done two rounds now of it, and I always came out of my summer one feeling, like, oh, actually, I did it when I was very new to the lakes. I didn't know a lot about fell running. I didn't know the area, so I'd always wanted to come back and do one once I was more confident. Um, so for now, I feel like I've done that, and that was what I got what I wanted to from this. I'd maybe come back to it again at some point, and don't get me wrong, I'd love to go at some point. I'll go and have a run of a couple of the legs at his pace just to see what it feels like. But I don't think, I'm not at that level right now, and I'm content to not be. Um, but there's also the joy of the lakes is there's so many rounds here, so you've got the Steve Power round, which is all the peaks over, I think it's 2,000 feet. So that's 110 miles. So it's a really, a nice big step up in terms of the distance. That's held by Andy Berry, who has freely admitted that it's doable, to take some time off that. You've got, again, from Andy Berry, you've got the 24 hours record, which is a really punchy one, and a really good record as well. You've got the Lakes Mears Waters, which has stood for over 40 years now, held by Joss Naylor.
Mm.
I think when we last spoke, I said about the coast to coast. I'm still on that. That's not gone away. That's something that I really want to do. So yeah, in terms of sort of solo projects, because what I really enjoy about that sort of thing is compared to a race is all the planning and the logistics that go into it. It's not just about your fitness, and your just how race ready you are. It's actually, can you put a good team together? What's your scheduling like? What's your nutrition like? How often you're going to sleep and stuff. And for me, that's the kind of next exciting thing is I've done a lot of most of the racing. Long distance I've done has been up to about 20 hours, so I've never needed to incorporate sleep. So I think for me, the next exciting step up is getting into kind of 36, 48 hours of racing where you might be looking at adding in some sleep. And then obviously, eventually, one day, this is a long way away yet, but it's kind of impossible now to live in the lakes and not look at the Wainwright's round,
Mm.
because that's just, that's the absolute crowning round there is. And when you look at that, I've been reading Sabs's book at the moment on her attempt, and there's an appeal to that, that like I'm in no rush. It will be years and years away yet, but it's there, and yeah,
Yeah, plenty to go at.
there's so much. So that's the thing, and I wouldn't want to just go from this kind of just be like, oh yeah, like I've done a good bob, let's do a better bob. Like there's more to do. There's more exciting stuff out there.
Yeah. You can always come back to it, can't you? In
Yeah.
years to come, if somebody comes in and takes your winter record, then you'll start probably thinking
Well,
maybe.
yeah, then I might, yeah.
Fair enough. No, what's like the rest of it? Well, there's nothing left of the year really, is there? What's sort of
Oh, I
on
know. It's
what's on the horizon?
um again, for me now it is about a bit of variance really. So I'm off to Gran Canaria to do the 84K
Yeah.
there. I'm getting a little bit of FOMO because there seem to be loads of Brits doing the full distance, 124K. But I'm sticking my guns with a slightly shorter distance. So that, and then doing some of the
Is that February?
that's yeah, end of February.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, sort of going into some of the GB trail qualifiers. So there's Skyfall Sky Race and 14 Peaks Ultra, um, which I think I'll be at both of those. So
Mm.
again, just moving to, and there that's around the sort of 40 to 50K distance. So just coming back down to something a little bit shorter for a while, and then I'll get some fell races in as well, and I'll find time for something a bit longer at
Mm.
some point next year.
Yeah. Would you thinking about going back to the Arc or anything?
Again, it's something maybe like one day that I'd go back to. I've kind of came away. I did 2 years of it, and obviously the first year was like a dream year. I had just an amazing time, and everything fell into place. The second year, I suffered. I had stomach issues from about halfway through, and it was the first time I'd had that, and it just really kind of threw me off. But I've learned a lot from that, and actually, it's become a really good experience in that I've managed to gain a lot more knowledge and insight now into how to properly fuel.
Mm.
So I think maybe one day I'd go back to it. But I like having some sort of big project or big distance to do over winter. I think it's great for training and for motivation, and it is quite a fun time of year to race. Of like the conditions that can get thrown at you.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, not ready for spine yet though. Before you ask.
Well, you said it. I never said it. You said the S
I
word.
think yeah, I could conceive doing in the next couple of years doing maybe one of the challenges. I think that's maybe starting to grow in my mind. I think the full distance. I think I've just seen too many photos of Jack Scott's face by the end and how harrowed he looks. I'm not quite ready for that.
Yeah. It's the photo that my wife has got of me. It's not even at the finish. It's the next day when because I finished like on the Friday night, like around I think it was about midnight, something like that, after a very long week, and we like the girls picked me up and sort of dragged me back to this Airbnb that we got and everything, and I just like kind of just like lay there like hallucinating for the rest of the night until the morning. And then like, I'd managed to have a shower and then sort of go downstairs for breakfast. And I just like I was thinking, I'm gonna have like a fry up and it'll be the best thing ever. And I just like couldn't eat it. Just sat there like sort of pushing it around the plate. Probably just sick of eating food. But the Kate, my wife, took a photo of me at the breakfast table, and it is absolutely it's horrific. Like it looks nothing like me at all. It just looks like some like swollen, look like
Yeah.
thingy off the Goonies. Uh, uh, yeah, that race. Yeah, I mean, I love that race, obviously, because I go on about it all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It clearly has that draw because there's so many people, who go back again and again.
Very much, yeah. Going back.
and there's, I guess, over that distance, there's so much to learn and to, to get right or to get wrong. So I can
Yeah.
see the appeal. I'm just not quite ready for that level of suffering yet.
I think you do well. I think you do well. You definitely do well at like you'd eat the sprint for breakfast easily. But yeah, I reckon like Challenger South is, that's it's a good it's a good and it
Mm,
takes, even for good runners, it takes a long time to do that. But you've got that experience of sort of being out on your own in the middle of nowhere for long periods. I think it's sort of in your
yeah.
way, although it's probably not sort of punchy enough sort of with the climbing. I don't know. There's a
Maybe,
lot
yeah, that would be the only thing, I guess, is, yeah, just the kind of the
undulating.
flatter aspects of it. Yeah. But
I wouldn't say it was flat in any bit,
well, yeah, sorry.
but it's definitely, yeah, it's not
Probably
quite
upset a
not
few
quite
people
sky
saying that, yeah.
running, not sky running.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But there's the spine will always be there. There's plenty of time for that.
Mm.
Yeah. Have you got any? Do you have any sort of things that you have to do for your sponsors? Are you under any sort of like if you can reveal that kind of thing? Do you get expected to do stuff by
Not
you?
really. I mean, yeah, like, a big part of the reason I'm with La Sportiva is because they're just great people, and it's a really nice team. So obviously they want to know what we're doing, and they ask you to sort of send your plans through for the year. And maybe, if I said I was I'm just doing sort of three fell races and that's it, then they might have questions. But generally they're just really supportive and they want us to do, things that excite us, and whether that's racing here, whether it's racing abroad, whether it's solo projects, they're on board with all of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair enough, isn't it? What's your thoughts on the because I've seen obviously Kim uses he's supported by Currans and everything.
Mm,
What are your and obviously there's a lot of people sort of champion it like Hayden Hawks and stuff. What it is Hayden Hawks, isn't it? Yeah. So
it is, yeah, yeah.
what are your thoughts on how that works? Because there's lots of I know there's been lots of research into it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I started using it. I think it was shortly after Morn that I started. Or no, it was just before Morn I started using it. Um, and yeah, I mean, there is a lot of good science behind it, and it's sort of anthocyanin, I think, is the what it has in it, basically, of the black currant. And it's just an extra boost. Basically, it's improving your recovery time, particularly from more intense workouts and things. Um, and yeah, I mean, if it's good enough for Hayden Hawks, and it's good
Yeah.
enough probably for most of us. But yeah, it's if it's even if it's just a small boost from a hard
Yeah.
training, improving your recovery slightly and things that that can add up very quickly. And I tried with Bob Graham. I sort of asked them for a bit of advice on the best way to use it during the run as well. And they said, sort of taking it about every 5 hours roughly. So I sort of took one before and two during. Um, it's not like you take it and suddenly you feel like you've been reborn or anything, but if it's making a bit of a difference in that next section, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, marginal gains are still
Yeah.
gains, aren't they? What's your take on the, not that it's a new sort of phenomenon like the whole high carb thing that it seems to be like in the spotlight at the minute. Is that something that you
Yeah.
get on board or
I mean, if I'm still working to get to 90, if I'm honest, like I'm quite behind the trend. Yeah, I mean, for some people, there seem to be people out there who are doing it and getting some really good results from it. I think there's not a whole lot of, I don't think there's much data behind it at the moment, from what I'm aware. There's sort of, there are studies being done at the moment just to kind of establish some baselines on what does 90 grams do for you, what does 120 grams do for you. Yeah, I think to me, so much of it as well, once you're into those sort of distances, so much of it is personal of what works for you, and it's quite hard to just, it's not a one size fits all. So yes, I know some runners who will go for that kind of 100 grams an hour, and I've seen some of them have amazing results. And that's incredible. I know if I right now tried to race on 120 grams an hour, I wouldn't get very far because I'd be throwing most of it back up. Um,
Yeah.
so where I don't know if that's a case of just for me 90 grams just sits better, or whether I just need to keep up with some gut training and try and get to that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
I think it's what works for you. You've got to find what's right for
yeah.
you personally.
I know so recently a couple of episodes ago I interviewed Paul Booth. Do you know Paul Booth? The
Yes, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So,
So he's doing the baseline studies at the moment
yeah.
on 90 grams, and I think he is keen in the future to do 120 as a comparison point.
But so I interviewed him, and he interestingly brought up the fact that in all the studies they'd done so far that had been sort of been published, you you may well be able to take in that amount, like the sort of 120s to 150, but your body your muscles can only sort of use I think they said that it was like 78 grams or something was actually
Right.
being. So he was saying that the discrepancy between what people are taking and what they're using might just be that they can just literally tolerate the extra carbs and they get, dispersed and it's probably stored as fat, or or just goes through the
Okay.
gut and isn't absorbed. So he was saying in some ways just being able to, sort of boasting that you can take on 120 to 150 might be just like a waste of money because your body's not using it. So why would you put that
Yeah.
amount?
And I think, yeah, it just, you have to be careful it doesn't just become a trend. Yeah, of like, well, I can do 120. Oh, well, I can do 130, and like, how far do you push that? If you're not actually feeling any extra gains from it, then
He
don't do
seemed
it.
to that might have been what was responsible for the attrition at UTMB at the end of the summer,
Okay.
right? That there were
Interesting.
so many people sort of went out early on that he thought maybe it was part of that everyone's like, oh, this the new trend of taking in 120 to
Mm.
150, and people were trying it, and it obviously unraveled for not that anyone sort of said that, but that was his
I
theory.
think there's a huge, yeah, I mean, because it was interesting seeing that, you know, the carnage at UTMB, and the attrition rate, particularly for a lot of British runners. And I think a lot of it's just the pressure of it as well, because a lot of people who target that race, it's kind of targeted almost to the exclusion of a
Yeah.
lot of the rest of the year. And you go in that, and, and obviously the start line on that is just, incomparable. There's nothing else like that. And the pace that you see some of them go off at, and that many people, I love British ultras because usually it's a couple of hundred of you on a muddy field. It's usually raining, and, and it's early in the morning, and you're all just kind of, you just kind of stand there and like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard, for and I saw like there was a really good post I thought from Emma Stewart that was really honest about it, of just actually how overwhelming it is to
Mm.
go into that environment. And I know I'd be the same. Like I'd fall apart around,
Mm.
in crowds of that size and a start line that intense and that packed. Like, so I think those factors play a huge part as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was Fee Pascal as well. She was saying that, wasn't she, as well, that she's
Mm,
felt the pressure of the race. Yeah,
yeah.
it's not to be. There's nothing else like it, is the sort of thing in the world. So yeah, the pressure.
Mm,
But anyway, we'll stick to these nice English runs where
yeah,
there's no pressure.
much, much better. A bit of
Right.
pressure is fine.
Yeah, a little bit of pressure is fine. Yeah, that's it. I appreciate you coming on and chatting, and
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
it's not been nice to catch up with you and see what you're up to these days, and congratulations on that Bob Graham winter
Yeah.
round record. It's
Oh, thanks.
you've put in the work, haven't you, over the years? So it's yeah,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
credit.
yeah.
Yeah, well done.
Cheers.
Um, so yeah, thanks for coming on, mate. I appreciate you giving up some of your time, and I'm sure that our paths will cross at some point. So
Yeah.
I'll see you at a race, or eventually I'll see you at the Spine. And
One day. One day.
so if you're playing Spine Bingo, that's four so far. Right. Cheers, mate. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Yeah. Cheers, Sam.
Mate. Bye, everyone.